In the waning months of World War II, as Europe's battlefields smoldered and regimes crumbled under the weight of total war, certain files were never meant to see the light of day. Locked away in forgotten bunkers, sealed within the dust-choked drawers of intelligence archives, and whispered only in the coded language of spies and defectors, these stories were buried to protect fragile alliances and unmasking truths too volatile for public knowledge. Allied censors, Soviet commissars, and Axis fugitives each played their part in erasing trails that might have reshaped the world's understanding of victory and justice. The documents that do survive, faded communiques, scorched ledgers, and intercepted transmissions, speak in broken fragments, hinting at vanished trains carrying plundered secrets. Black ledgers cataloguing silenced witnesses, ghostly signals from the depths of the North Sea, and forbidden pacts struck in the ashes of collapsing empires. Beneath every battle map and propaganda poster lies a second war, a shadow war of intelligence, betrayal, and concealment that continues to haunt declassified files. Tonight, as if lifting the rusted hatch of a long-sealed vault, we unearth 4 disturbing World War II stories thought to have been erased forever. Each is a thread pulled from the fabric of official history, a reminder that even in victory, nations will sacrifice truth for expedience. The corridors of power may have closed these cases, but the echoes of their secrets, hidden in tunnels, forests, fjords, and forgotten safe houses, refuse to remain silent. Listen closely. The past is speaking again, and it does not whisper, it warns. Chapter 1. The Vanished Train of Operation Iron Wolf. Under the iron-grey skies of February 1945, Eastern Europe was a collapsing chessboard of desperate retreats and advancing armies. Königsberg, once the proud Prussian capital, was in flames as the Red Army's Third Belarusian Front tightened its siege. Amid the chaos, a secret Wehrmacht communiqué, dated February 15th and marked Streng Geheim, outlined Operation Iron Wolf. The covert evacuation of Reich treasures, experimental jet schematics, and sensitive SS dossiers aboard an armoured train bound for the Bavarian Alps. The order bore the signature of General Erich von dem Bach-Zelewski, notorious for suppressing uprisings, and carried a chilling footnote: "No record shall remain." The train, escorted by hardened elements of the 11th Panzer Division and camouflaged under the designation Hospital Convoy 77, slipped through the Sudeten Mountains under heavy snow and radio silence. Witnesses from scattered Volkssturm units recalled its passage. Headlamps blackened, only the rhythmic hiss of steam betraying its presence as it disappeared into a disused tunnel near the Ore Mountains. Bletchley. Park Station X intercepted. Fragmented SS signals reporting Wolf cargo, secure and tunnel sealed, prompting an urgent British Y-Service inquiry logged, under code T972. Yet hours later, frantic German field messages referenced a firefight. Rogue commandos, possibly Abwehr loyalists opposed to SS power, had ambushed the convoy. By dawn, no survivors were reported. Soviet NKVD dispatches, declassified in 1989, corroborated rumors of a skirmish. Shell casings of mixed calibers were discovered near the tunnel entrance, alongside burned uniforms stripped of insignia. The NKVD's Major Alexander Vasiliev noted in his report that explosives had been preset within the tunnel's walls, detonated to bury both treasure and testimony. The coordinates of the site were redacted in all subsequent copies, replaced with a blunt directive: object neutralized, discussion prohibited. In the months following Germany's surrender, Allied teams scoured rail networks across Bohemia and Saxony. A partially scorched Gestapo file No. 17, recovered from a bunker outside Munich, contained a single surviving sentence: "The wolf sleeps where none shall wake him." American CIC, Counterintelligence Corps operatives pressed captured SS officers for answers. One former logistics officer, interrogated at Nuremberg under the pseudonym Prisoner K-47, spoke of crates stenciled with Reichsbank seals and a lead-lined container rumoured to hold blueprints for advanced Messerschmitt Me 262 jet fighters. He described a final, desperate exchange of gunfire echoing through the tunnel, then a deafening collapse. Moments later, he claimed, radio contact with his rear guard ceased forever. Local Czech villagers whispered of strange nighttime activity in the Ore Mountains during the Soviet occupation. In 1947, a farmer reported discovering a twisted rail fragment and charred wooden panel bearing the faded markings WW2. Soviet engineers quickly cordoned off the area, citing unstable terrain, before constructing a restricted military depot atop the suspected site. A declassified 1963 CIA memo referencing satellite imagery under Operation Corona noted an unexplained heat anomaly in the same sector during winter thaw, a possible indication of buried metallic mass or munitions decay. Yet official West German requests for excavation were repeatedly denied during détente, citing environmental hazards. Theories multiplied among Cold War intelligence circles. Some believed the cargo included stolen gold reserves from the Reichsbank vaults in Berlin, vanished during the final weeks of the war. Others whispered of Wunderwaffe, miracle weapons, blueprints, and a sealed dossier implicating high-ranking Nazi officials in clandestine negotiations with Western allies. Polish resistance veterans, interviewed in the 1970s, suggested that rogue SS factions intended to use the treasures as bargaining chips for safe passage to Argentina or Spain. Still, no definitive evidence surfaced. An East German Stasi report, uncovered after the fall of the Berlin Wall, hinted at unauthorized Soviet tunneling in the 1950s near the suspected collapse site. The report's final page, heavily censored, contained a handwritten note. We found traces of wolf, orders to rebury. By the late 20th century, treasure hunters and amateur historians flocked to the Sudeten tunnels, armed with ground-penetrating radar and tales of Nazi gold trains. In 2015, an excavation near Wałbrzych in Poland, widely publicized as the discovery of a lost Nazi train, was speculated to be connected to Iron Wolf. But experts debunked the claim, finding only natural rock formations. Official German federal archives continue to classify documents relating to rail convoys from Königsberg, citing national security and private property rights. Requests under Germany's federal Freedom of Information Act are met with polite denials. Records not available or non-existent. Weathered maps and blurred reconnaissance photos remain the only tangible clues. Survivors from Soviet engineering brigades stationed in the Ore Mountains recall orders to divert underground streams and seal entrances with reinforced concrete. One veteran, interviewed anonymously in 1992, described hearing hollow echoes beneath his feet during blasting operations, as if a cavern waited below. He claimed to have seen uniform buttons, eagles without swastikas, washed down a stream days later. His testimony was dismissed as unreliable, yet no one could explain the missing train cars logged in captured Wehrmacht rail records. Operation Iron Wolf has since become a ghost story told among archivists and intelligence officers. It is whispered during late-night sessions at war museums, cited in hushed tones at conspiracy forums, and occasionally reappears in sensational headlines when another excavation begins. But to those who have seen the redacted files or held the brittle papers marked streng geheim, the legend feels heavier than folklore. Somewhere under the Sudeten rock, beneath decades of moss and forgotten war scars, lies an armored convoy sealed by fear, betrayal, and calculated silence. The cold earth keeps its secrets, and the wolf, as the Gestapo file warned, still sleeps where none shall wake him. For now, the truth remains entombed, its recovery perhaps too dangerous, its implications too vast to disturb. Chapter 2. The Black Ledger of Katyn's Silence. In the spring of 1940, deep in the dense forests near Katyn, a tragedy unfolded that would be denied, distorted, and suppressed for decades. The world knows the surface story: the massacre of over 20,000 Polish officers, intellectuals, and professionals by the Soviet NKVD. Yet buried in Soviet archives, specifically Special Object 82, lay another layer of darkness. Among the documents briefly unsealed during the turbulent months of 1992 was a single, torn ledger known as the Black Ledger. Its brittle pages recorded not only the executions of captured Polish prisoners, but also a chilling follow-up directive: the erasure of anyone who might expose the operation. Red Army logistics officers who managed transport trains, railway workers who saw unusual convoys at night, and even low-ranking NKVD guards who began to ask questions, all were quietly removed. The ledger's heading bore Stalin's signature beside the cipher PZ412, and in a scrawled margin note, Lavrenti Beria wrote, "Total silence protocol. No witnesses. No trail." British intelligence learned fragments of this truth through intercepted transmissions from the Polish underground. MI6 classified these whispers under Operation Foxglove, assigning case officer Edward Collins to collate the anomalies. A 1943 OSS memo, redacted until 1987, described Stalin's personal insistence that any discussion of Katyn be silenced to preserve the fragile Soviet-Allied alliance against Hitler. The Yalta Conference records reveal that Roosevelt and Churchill were handed heavily sanitized reports, carefully omitting evidence that might fracture the coalition before Germany's surrender. When the Nazis first uncovered mass graves in 1943 and invited the International Red Cross to investigate, the Soviet Union vehemently denied involvement, blaming the Germans. But the Black Ledger, if genuine, undermines every Soviet denial. One entry lists the transfer of secondary assets, a euphemism believed to mean those who had transported prisoners, to secret detention sites in Smolensk. Another page, missing its upper corner, includes a cryptic annotation: Prague route secured, use German uniforms. Historians speculate this may indicate Soviet operatives staged false flag operations to divert blame or eliminate witnesses far from the front. In the post-war years, surviving Polish exiles in London submitted affidavits to Allied authorities describing vanished comrades who had worked Soviet rail lines. These affidavits were quietly shelved. A declassified 1956 CIA analysis noted that Soviet counterintelligence, now the KGB, had destroyed early NKVD records connected to Katyn, citing irrelevance to ongoing security matters. The Black Ledger itself vanished from Moscow's archives in 1995, shortly after an archivist known as Mikhail S. defected to the West. Mikhail disappeared en route to a safe house in Vienna, and the suitcase believed to contain ledger fragments was never recovered. Cold War politics ensured the truth remained obscured. In 1971, Polish dissidents circulated samizdat pamphlets referencing a mysterious list of lists, an unofficial name for the Black Ledger, but the Polish security service cracked down, arresting anyone who possessed a copy. Western media occasionally alluded to missing Soviet documents but avoided direct accusations to maintain détente. Even after the Soviet Union's collapse, Russian officials released only select documents confirming NKVD responsibility for Katyn, carefully sidestepping references to wider purges of witnesses. Eyewitness fragments persist. In 1989, a retired Soviet rail worker named Anatoly Kuznetsov confessed to a BBC journalist that his brother, a logistics officer, vanished after transporting sealed freight cars to Smolensk in 1940. His brother's last letter warned of unnatural cargo and no return orders. Kuznetsov's testimony was dismissed as anecdotal, yet it aligns eerily with Black Ledger entries referencing special transports. Modern Polish historians argue that the missing ledger represents a deliberate effort to prevent future accountability. Without the full document, no comprehensive record exists of those secondary victims: the railwaymen, the drivers, the minor NKVD clerks, silenced to preserve a lie. Forensic evidence from Katyn graves shows varied calibers of ammunition, suggesting multiple execution teams and possibly multiple cleanup squads. In 2010, during a tense diplomatic exchange, a Russian official reportedly hinted at documents better left buried. Some believe this was a reference to the Black Ledger, a final warning to avoid digging deeper into the past. To this day, requests for access to specific NKVD transport orders from April 1940 are denied by the Russian government, citing national security. The story of Katyn remains an open wound for Poland and a symbol of suppressed truth for historians worldwide. The Black Ledger, if it still exists, could illuminate not just the massacre itself, but the ruthless efficiency of Stalin's machinery of silence. Its disappearance is more than an archival footnote. It is a calculated erasure. Somewhere, perhaps hidden in a private collection, buried in a forgotten safe house, or quietly destroyed by fearful hands, the ledger's pages wait. And with them waits the full measure of a crime that reshaped trust between nations and redefined the boundaries of wartime secrecy. Until it is found, the forests of Katyn whisper only part of their story, and the silence Stalin demanded endures like a shadow stretching across generations. Chapter 3. Ghost Signals of U-864's Final Transmission. The icy waters off the coast of Norway in February 1945 were a graveyard for dreams of Axis victory. The German submarine U-864 A Type 9D2 U-boat under Captain Ralph Reimer Wolfram slipped out of Bergen on a mission codenamed Operation Caesar. Official histories describe its sinking by HMS Venturer, the only known case of a submarine sinking another submarine while both were submerged. But the fragmented signals intercepted by Bletchley Park Station X tell a far stranger, darker story. A cryptic Morse message logged as Signal 17B864 read only, "Cargo secured, proceeding under altered orders, shadows in pursuit." 30 minutes after the reported sinking, British Y service technicians logged an unexplained second ping, faint but distinct, suggesting either a surviving sister vessel or a decoy transmission. That discrepancy was quietly archived under T846C and never mentioned in public. Reports U-864's known cargo included over 65 tons of mercury, sealed in steel flasks for Japan's weapons program, Messerschmitt jet components, and 2 Japanese naval officers whose presence confirmed secret Axis technology exchanges. Norwegian resistance fighters later whispered of an unidentified submarine surfacing near Bergen days after Venturer's attack, escorted by Luftwaffe aircraft before vanishing into the fjords. The fjords themselves, labyrinthine channels surrounded by sheer cliffs and perpetual mist, offered perfect cover for hidden operations. Local fishermen reported hearing engines beneath the water at night, long after U-864's supposed destruction. Some described unnatural metallic echoes traveling through the fjord network, as if heavy machinery still moved in secret chambers below. Decades later, Cold War sonar scans conducted by NATO revealed anomalies inconsistent with a single wreck. Declassified microfilm from GCHQ references clandestine dives in 1972, marked "Caution, Caesar debris, containment imperative." The contents of those dives remain classified, fueling speculation that not all of U-864's cargo lies at the bottom of the North Sea. Environmental teams investigating mercury leakage in the 21st century have documented multiple debris fields, suggesting that more than one vessel may have been involved. Former Kriegsmarine radioman Hans Weber, interviewed in 1968, recalled that Operation Caesar had been altered at the last moment, redirecting U-864 toward a secret rendezvous point designated Wolf's Mouth. Weber insisted that a second submarine shadowed U-864 to provide diversionary signals if intercepted. His testimony was dismissed by post-war historians as senile invention, yet the timing of the ghost signal remains unexplained. Another source, an OSS memo recovered from the US National Archives, mentions Japanese officers extracted, destination unknown, dated 2 weeks after U-864's supposed sinking. The memo's authenticity has been debated but never conclusively disproven. In the 1990s, commercial divers searching for salvageable metal off Fedje Island reported hearing faint Morse-like clicks on hydrophones, patterns resembling outdated Kriegsmarine codes. They described feeling watched beneath the crushing darkness, as if remnants of a war long ended still prowled the seabed. The Norwegian government increased restrictions around the wreck site, citing environmental hazards from the mercury, but some suspect a deeper motive, to discourage investigation into what truly lies beneath. The mythology of U-864 persists in naval circles. It is spoken of as a ghost submarine, a relic of a desperate Axis alliance and a cautionary tale of incomplete victories. For NATO analysts during the Cold War, the unresolved questions surrounding U-864 were more than historical curiosities. They were potential flashpoints if hidden technology or toxins were ever recovered by hostile powers. Soviet reconnaissance aircraft were spotted over the Fedje area in the late 1970s, prompting classified US Navy briefings warning of Caesar asset retrieval. Today, U-864's wreck remains partially buried in silt, leaking mercury that poisons surrounding waters. Efforts to raise or contain the wreck have been delayed for decades, officially due to technical difficulties and environmental risk. But whispers persist that any disturbance might reveal not just toxic metal, but evidence of a post-sinking extraction, evidence that would force nations to admit their wartime histories are incomplete. The second signal, that faint and lonely ping 30 minutes after the supposed sinking, haunts every sonar sweep and fuels the suspicion that U-864's cargo, or its passengers, escaped Allied grasp. The sea, silent and unyielding, keeps its secrets. Beneath the grey Norwegian waves, the ghosts of Operation Caesar may still wait. Chapter 4. The Forgotten Pact of Operation Autumn Gale. In the final frostbitten weeks of January 1945, as Soviet forces pushed through Silesia and the Western Allies prepared for their final drive into Germany, Prague was a city of shadows and whispered betrayals. Among the declassified fragments retrieved from an abandoned Abwehr safe house on the Vltava's banks was a partially burned dossier stamped Unternehmen, Herbststurm, Operation Autumn Gale. The documents hinted at a clandestine meeting between elements of the German Abwehr, intelligence service, and representatives of the Soviet NKVD. The rendezvous allegedly took place in a shuttered warehouse on the outskirts of Prague, under the cover of a civilian food distribution convoy. According to a surviving page of field notes, filed under Gestapo Case Record 212K, both sides sought to negotiate a localized ceasefire and the transfer of sensitive research. W2 rocket schematics and details of Western Allied plans gleaned from captured OSS agents. The suggestion that Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union could have struck a secret, tactical arrangement in the war's dying months is a truth both sides sought to bury. The page contained code phrases such as Black Birch and Red Jackdaw, believed to be operational signals for the exchange. It also referenced an unnamed intermediary, possibly a double agent, tasked with ensuring neither side betrayed the other during the handover. Western intelligence only became aware of the possibility decades later, when a declassified MI6 cable from 1961 mentioned Autumn Gale as a Soviet leverage point during early Cold War disarmament talks. The cable's author warned that public knowledge of such a pact would complicate moral narratives of victory. Czech partisans who operated in the Prague underground recalled rumors of heavy truck movements on a snowy night in February 1945, followed by unusual silence from certain resistance contacts known to monitor German supply lines. One partisan journal entry, later smuggled to London, spoke of German officers wearing altered insignia, accompanied by men with Russian accents, moving crates marked with both Wehrmacht and Cyrillic stencils. Days later, those partisans vanished, their names struck from resistance rosters. The Soviet archives, opened briefly in the early 1990s, contained a single memo from an NKVD officer named Sergei Antonov. Autumn Gale, success ensured, assets secured, no acknowledgement. In post-war Europe, the concept of a temporary Nazi-Soviet collaboration in 1945 was politically radioactive. The Nuremberg trials made no mention of such a pact. When Western journalists posed questions in the 1950s, Soviet diplomats ridiculed the idea as fascist propaganda. Yet, a 1974 CIA briefing note, partially declassified in 2008, warned of unverified intelligence suggesting exchange of rocket data via Prague, Winter 45. This note cross-referenced earlier OSS reports of missing German scientists who were neither captured by the Allies nor documented as Soviet prisoners. By the late Cold War, whispers of Autumn Gale resurfaced among Eastern Bloc dissidents and Western intelligence veterans alike. Some claimed that the pact enabled the Soviets to accelerate their ballistic missile program, using fragments of V2 knowledge not obtained through overt means. Others speculated that Abwehr elements hoped to secure leniency from Moscow in exchange for betraying Hitler's hardliners or sabotaging the SS. The lack of concrete evidence meant historians dismissed Autumn Gale as conspiracy. But the burned dossier pages, the Gestapo case number, and the MI6 cable remain stubborn anomalies, hard artifacts that refuse tidy dismissal. In 2011, an excavation beneath a demolished warehouse in Prague's industrial district uncovered rusted weapons crates and decayed Soviet field rations dated early 1945. Check. Archaeologists noted the unusual mingling of German and Soviet materials, but local authorities quickly restricted further digging. Officially, they cited concerns about unexploded ordnance. Unofficially, according to a leaked municipal email, the Ministry of Defense intervened, labeling the site historically sensitive. The enduring mystery of Operation Autumn Gale is not merely the possibility of a forgotten pact, but the uncomfortable implication that, in the war's chaotic final days, ideology could bend under the weight of survival. For two mortal enemies to even consider collaboration reveals a level of desperation and pragmatism that challenges the simplistic narratives of good versus evil. The fact that these fragments were found not in Moscow or Berlin, but in a forgotten Prague safe house, suggests deliberate obfuscation, a meeting neither side wished to remember. The city's cobblestone streets have been rebuilt, its war scars plastered over. But somewhere in a Czech archive drawer or a private collector's vault, the full dossier may still exist, waiting for a world ready to confront the inconvenient truth it contains. Until then, Operation Autumn Gale lingers like smoke on a winter night, thin, elusive, and impossible to grasp, yet undeniably present. In the quiet corners of war's aftermath, silence often speaks louder than cannon fire. The vanished train sealed beneath Sudeten rock, the ledger swallowed by Moscow's archives, the ghost ping echoing beneath Norwegian waves, and the forgotten Pact smothered in Prague's shadows. All remind us that official histories are often deliberate fictions. These fragments suggest a hidden battlefield where alliances shifted like smoke, where governments sacrificed truth to preserve fragile order, and where inconvenient evidence was buried beneath concrete, snow, or silt. Even decades later, redacted memos and scorched documents whisper of power brokers who shaped the post-war world while pretending their hands were clean. What else lies sealed in forgotten vaults, waiting for a careless archivist or a collapsing tunnel to reveal it? The lingering mercury at Fedje Island leaks not just poison but suspicion, and every closed request at the German Federal Archives hints at treasures more dangerous than gold. As long as the earth holds its secrets and the sea keeps its dead, these disturbing stories remain unresolved. Ghostly echoes reminding us that victory is never as simple as flags on a map. The past is not silent. It waits, patient and cold, for those brave enough to listen. Somewhere, a rusting lock gives way. A page curls in forgotten darkness, and the warning is clear. History has claws, and it does not forgive those who bury the truth.